Costs are obviously of relevance for any company. And unless the company is a monopolist and doesn't have any competitors, another factor to consider is possible competitive reactions and how competitors may decide to react to a certain price change. This brings us directly to the topic of price wars. Price wars are defined as pricing campaigns that are very often designed with the objective to drive competing firms out of the market by competitively lowering prices. The idea of a price war is that we have two firms. Firm 1 starts to lower the price by 1%, firm 2 lowers it by 2%, 1 goes back and lowers it by 3%, and so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, one company has to drop out because one company can no longer profitably sell the product at the price that the market demands. Price wars are very often also described as battles to win the consumer, which makes sense because the two firms fight in order to sell products to the consumer. And very often they are perceived as something good because they lead to lower prices. But unfortunately, they rarely are, because these continuous lowering of prices can have two negative effects. The first negative effect is that products get less and less good because firms need to be more and more cost conscious in producing them. And second, if they work, all firms would be catapulted out of the market except one, which means the firm at the end would be a monopolist, and nobody stops that firm from raising prices again, probably to a higher level once that has been achieved. Still, they're very common in industries like PC hardware, diapers, phone calls, airline tickets. I mean, there are lots of different examples. And the idea of a price war and why they occur is the following. Assume there is a firm that develops a new product. So the firm builds a technical resource base which leads to a competitive advantage. They invest into R&D, they develop a new innovation, and they create a product based on this innovation. The firm then tries to sell that product in a new market and becomes a pioneer. Two options: either the product is a flop, well then we end the story here, or the product is a success, and then very likely other people want to copy that firm and develop the same product. So followers will start to imitate, and the pioneer will start creating hurdles for imitation, bringing out new versions of the product, trying to argue that his brand is better than the competing brands. And obviously the imitators will try to overcome these hurdles by either copying new product designs and arguing that they have a brand that is as good as the one of the pioneer. And then the pioneer has two options. Option one is that the pioneer decides, okay, this market is burned now. I go out of this market, I go back into R&D, invest in a new innovation, and launch a new product. And there are many companies who are like this. Think, for example, of Apple, who continuously invests in developing new products, from iPhones to iPads to AirPods and all the other things. However, some other companies may decide that it's probably more efficient to stick with what they have and to engage in a very strong competition with all those followers. And in this case, the pioneer would abandon the product design R&D approach and instead focus on something that is much easier to achieve, namely simply cutting prices. So the pioneer would start to build up resources in order to reduce manufacturing costs, cut prices, and under certain conditions, this can then lead to a price war. There's a very classical example of this price war, and that's an example in the early 2000s between Dell and HP and Compaq as the three main computer PC main producers. In February 2001, Dell launched an advertising campaign where they said that whatever you buy with them will always be 10% cheaper as what competitors would charge for the same product. In April 2001, so just 2 months later, Dell became by consequence the largest PC manufacturer, because the message was really easy. Why would you want to buy anywhere else if you get the same thing from Dell just 10% cheaper? A month later, in May 2001, the two main competitors of Dell at the time, HP and Compaq, carried out their own price cuts as a response to Dell's strategy. And in 2001, at the end of the year, in December, Compaq overtook its competitors, including Dell, and became the largest company. Well, as you would expect, the prices for PCs fell dramatically in this context, about 2/3, from about $570 to about $200. And the interesting question is why? Sort of you would assume that every player knows what the outcome of this game is, right? Every of the three companies should have known that if they continuously undercut each other's prices, the only thing what they do is they cut out each other's margins. So why are the firms so unstrategic, so stupid in acting? Well, and you might have seen in other classes, the concept of game theory. Game theory is one way how we can analyze this. Game theory is a way of describing possible outcomes that can be achieved when two or more actors are in some kind of interactive nature. There's a lot of literature on game theory. In 1994, 3 researchers won a Nobel Prize on it. You may know the prisoner's dilemma, which is one of the most common examples in game theory. If you know nothing about game theory, I encourage you to go to YouTube and watch 1 or 2 videos about it. It's really interesting. There are lots of different types of games. There are cooperative games where players try to cooperate in order to increase their payout versus non-cooperative games. There are zero-sum games, which essentially imply that whatever one player loses, another player gains. There are also negative and positive sum games, which means players can all collectively lose or collectively gain. It's a very, very strong literature. Now, we can apply game theory to the analysis of price wars. Let's go back to the example. Look at Dell on one side and HP and Compaq on the other side. Each of these 2 players, Dell and HP and Compaq, both can decide to either keep their prices or cut prices. Nobody knows what the other party is going to do. Let's assume you are HP and Compaq. You don't know what Dell is going to do, so you just make 2 scenarios. In scenario 1, we assume that Dell keeps their prices constant. Well, if Dell keeps their prices constant, we have an incentive to cut our prices, because if we cut prices and Dell keeps the price constant, we can increase market share and we can grow at the expense of Dell. If Dell cuts their prices, we also have an incentive to cut prices, because at least we keep our market share and we don't lose out to Dell. So whatever Dell is doing, we would always cut prices. Well, this problem is symmetrical. So Dell thinks exactly the same way, which means at the end of the day, both players decide to cut prices, although, as you can very easily see on this matrix, the bottom right corner is no change in market share, but a massive reduction in profit compared to the top left corner. Now, a lot of literature has analyzed these types of price wars and why stuff like this happens. And you find the main argument that I just made here on this slide. But the main idea is, if each party acts individually in their own self-interest, we may achieve an outcome that collectively everyone is worse off. That's the key idea of game theory, and specifically of the prisoner's dilemma. So naturally, what players would probably have an incentive to do is to cooperate. And this is obviously illegal. We call it a price fixing case. There are lots of different examples of price fixing cases in the literature. Go on Wikipedia and check it out. There is a very nice video about how price fixing happens in the glasses industry by Luxottica, an Italian company that you can also find on YouTube. So while price fixing cases may certainly be the most efficient way for the players, and in the example that I just gave you, that would imply that HP, Compaq, and Dell collectively agree to keep prices up, they are in most cases illegal. Now, the question is there something in between? Is there something between a price war and not doing a price war? Is there probably a smarter way of doing things? If you look back on the last session, I told you that if you are a retailer, you possibly have the chance of doing something in addition to sales promotion, which is everyday low price. Well, the same applies here. If you're a retailer, you do not only have to do price wars, and one thing that you can do is a low price promise or a price matching promise. And you have probably seen this in lots of different settings when retailers say, we beat the best price. If you find our product at the same price or at a cheaper price anywhere else, show us that you found it anywhere else and we would match the price. These price matching guarantees are a smarter way of doing price wars, because you do not lower the price for everyone. You only lower the price for those consumers who go through the trouble of actually finding an alternative offer. So in a way, a price war is like a customized promotion, a price matching strategy, where you only match and lower the price for those customers for whom price is particularly important and to go through the pain of finding a lower price. And in the last section now, I want to talk a little bit about distribution channels.